I'm Mark Bentham.
And I'm Graham Nichols.
And I'm Katie Holloway, and you are listening to Ordinary. Hello, did you both have a nice Easter break?
Yes, thank you very much.
We did. We've rehearsed this for quite a few minutes. Yes, we had a very nice Easter. Thank you. I went on holiday for a week to Cornwall and it rained a lot. But
was it really windy there?
Very windy.
Yeah, it was quite windy.
Massive waves. There's famously some very, very big waves in Cape Cornwall, or whatever it's called. Really big. Yeah.
Fun. Did you watch them or did you stay
He was surfing.
No.
Surfing.
Graham was surfing them, and he was at the top of them. He was cruising him and
Last
Caroline.
I heard you couldn't stand up on a surfboard. Is that still true?
I can't stand up well on a surfboard. I have enough trouble standing up on a skateboard, to be honest.
Oh yeah, it's got wheels though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but
I believe.
It's still very hard to balance.
That makes it harder with the wheels.
But I like a bit of bodyboarding, but it was basically too cold.
Yeah. What'd you get up
Fair
to,
enough.
Mark?
Not a lot, really. Visiting family, hanging. Children are doing exams, so we are taking it easy. Yeah, we only had a couple of days off, so. Indeed.
Oh, nice. Let's get to it. Modesty today. I thought it'd be good to discuss. It's quite it's been in the media quite a lot, the idea of modesty, I think, particularly in clothes. There's been a lot of stuff to do with schools, I think mostly in America, but probably because we have school uniforms over here. So I thought it would be good to have a chat about it. I feel like the issue of modesty, like wearing modest clothes, comes up quite a lot in Christian circles. So maybe Graham, kick us off. Why is... sorry, I thought I hadn't pressed record on my record, but I have. It's okay. Why is modesty something that Christians are concerned with?
I think for... when we get into the topic, we might say this more, but I think it is something that's specifically spoken about in the Bible. So we need to think about what it means. I think it becomes an issue because people have their interpretations of what that means. I think some of that is good. Some of that is cultural. Some of that is legalistic. So I think it's quite a knotty little topic. I recently had a little kind of Twitter exchange with somebody about it. And very quickly, this was amongst a combination of men and women who were kind of firing back at me. And it becomes quite an emotive topic quite quickly. I'm not sure everything I've always said on modesty has always been entirely balanced and reasonable, but it will be today.
You promise.
I promise. But so I think it's just easy to not nuance it correctly.
Yeah.
And for it to become an issue of legalism and policing. So I think it's a topic that's important, but also easy to abuse. As a topic, or easy to, abuse, but easy to misuse the topic.
Yeah, that's helpful. Do you want to add anything to that, Mark?
I don't think so. I think Graham's nicely navigated the waters for now.
Dipped your toe in, but not standing up on a surfboard in them.
No problem with modesty in Cornwall, by the way.
Not this time of year.
Not warm enough to have any. Yeah. Yes, that's really distracted me. Mark, what does the Bible have to say about modesty? Is it something the Bible talks about much or at all?
No, I was trying to think about the verses. I mean, there's obviously the verses in terms of 1 Peter, probably the most famous in terms of the adornment of where inner beauty is, all those kind of issues. But I think in terms of just, in one sense, it goes to what are we talking about when we're talking about modesty? Yeah. What is it we're trying to unpick? Does the Bible say, "Thou shalt be modest"? But I think it's more of a heart issue, isn't it? It's more of a concern about what am I trying to do, not do, in this area of motives in those kind of ways. So I think the Bible does have plenty to say, but it probably addresses more the heart issues that are driving what is pushing some of these issues both ways.
Yeah. So what are those heart issues?
Well,
Or
there
what
would
might
be
they be?
well, on one side, you're talking modesty. Why for a bloke or a woman? Let's this is true for both in terms of showing off external beauty or trying to. So there's in the reality the sexualization of stuff, but there's also just a sense of pride of wanting to be seen, to be this, that, to impress, to. And I think that's true for men and women. I think that's just one sex, as it were. It works itself out slightly differently, but both issues are there. So I think it's things like pride, things like, and then that then triggers other issues, how people respond. Which I'm not sure is necessarily part of a reason that I'm trying to in a Christian circle. But I think mainly it's examining why I wouldn't want to be modest. What am I trying to do? And I think that stems probably from a pride, rebellion, image kind of area.
Yeah. It's really interesting you're talking about that and pride rather than covering up or not covering up. So, for instance, I today am going around wearing my T-shirt, which it says NaNoWriMo winner, which I got because I completed a challenge. And suddenly you're saying this, I'm like, am I being immodest by wearing my quite baggy T-shirt, which proclaims I completed this challenge a couple of years ago? Is that immodest? I put you on the spot now because I'm currently wearing it, but
well, it may be.
Yeah.
I think it's the heart of what we're trying to do, isn't it? And why we're trying to do things. And I think this is where we get ourselves unstuck, because we try and make it other people's problem when we come to modesty. I think that's often where it goes. You be modest because you're causing a problem for someone else, rather than starting with, I think, which is where Jesus always starts with anything, is our own hearts and how I'm responding. So why do I? And of course, there's an element, isn't there, in all of us, in what we wear, what we say and do. That isn't, no one is entirely, let's face it, pure motives. But all of us are kind of conscious, more often than not, of what we wear. We don't want to look like a mess. We're not trying to be, So there is a sense whereby there's a reality to that. Sometimes that then goes too far. That I'm so gripped by my appearance and what I look like, and I'm trying to impress outwardly. And again, it's the heart. What's really driving that? What's gripping that? What's causing that? Is that because you want others to look at you? Is it because you want others to, approve of you? Is it because you want others to, fancy you? You know what I mean? What is going on of why you're doing what you're doing, rather than, am I just trying to, reflect Christ, love others? Yeah,
that's really helpful. I think I've always thought of this, or maybe always been taught of this issue as a kind of like a lust thing, a sexuality thing, and actually not really thought about there are all kinds of wrong reasons and right reasons for wearing the clothes you wear. Do you think, so my next question was, are we over concerned with modesty as Christians? But now I'm thinking maybe we're under concerned in some areas and more over concerned in others. So are we perhaps over concerned with the sexuality of the things we wear? What do you reckon?
I think I really agree with what Mark's saying. This is because there's the but coming now. I really agree that it is primarily about the heart. There's an interesting collection of words that Paul uses, and there's the Peter verse. There's also Paul who talks about dressing modestly in 1 Timothy 2. And
you've shocked Mark so much.
He puts together a series of words in 1 Timothy 2, which are to do with respectable, appropriate, honourable, and includes the word for modesty. But even the word for modesty is kind of decency. It's not quite clear what it means. What's the point I'm getting to? However, it still does seem to apply to clothing. And so although it's, as Mark was saying, it's more important about what the heart motive is, it does have a cashing out in terms of what people wear. And I agree with Mark, it's a problem for men and a problem for women. But it is interesting that Paul points out this as an issue for women, in a way that he doesn't for men. And I think it is possible in a way that's not possible for men. I think it's possible or more of a temptation for women to dress in such a way that is showing that they want to draw attention to themselves, or to be provocative sexually or just rebelliously in some way. And there is something particular about that. I don't think that you can kind of get away from that.
Yeah,
go on.
I feel like I want to push back on that a little bit. In that when the topic of modesty and what you wear comes up, it's usually, I might be wrong, but I feel like it is usually aimed at women. It's interesting that Paul addresses women, so maybe it's right that way. Yeah. But I was thinking about it and thinking how in the summer especially, there are lots of men who walk around with no tops on, with their pants showing above their trousers, and their and often like quite tight t-shirts showing off all their muscles and things. And I think actually, I mean, half the time it just makes me feel a bit queasy, but that clearly is, quite, I think it does affect men and their choices a lot more than perhaps a culture would say, or maybe even the Christian culture would say. So I was thinking of an example.
I think it's more of a modern cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Not entirely, but or maybe it comes in cycles of where we're most godless. Those things emerge in men as well as in women.
Perhaps.
But I think there's. I don't think women are entirely responsible for men's reaction. I think men. Yeah. You can't just use the sexualization or the lust argument to say women should never wear anything that could possibly cause men to lust, because that's putting all the responsibility on women.
Yeah.
But I don't think at the other extreme you could say there's not a realistic thing going on that is different amongst men and women. I don't think you will experience quite the same feelings when you see this guy with the tight shirt as, generally speaking, men will experience when they observe women in the same situation. That's not to say that they don't have their own responsibility to guard their heart and to guard their eyes, and that they can't ever blame the women. But it is true that if you want to love your neighbour, you will be just aware of the different ways the different reactions it provokes. And I think in the Bible, it talks in Proverbs about dressing like a prostitute. And that probably connects up with where Paul and Peter talk about the ostentatious clothing. It's provocative and ostentatious, those two things kind of together, which might be sexually provocative. It might just be dressing like a prostitute, because prostitutes ancient world, modern Greek world, were dressing ostentatiously. You wouldn't dress drably as a prostitute. You'd dress in lots of braided hair and fine clothes. So it does have a bit of a sexual element. It's not nothing to do with that. And just while we're at it, because I want to roll, you've got to think about the fall as well, and think what happened at the fall. Why are we clothed? Because there is a degree of shame, and not to do with provoking lust or anything else. But if we try and pretend that shame doesn't exist, we're kind of ignoring the fall. So if we say, well, particularly as a woman, where you could say, well, I can walk around topless, it's fine. You're kind of ignoring the fact that basically throughout history, pretty much in nearly all generations, those I'm going to say those things, those parts of the body have been covered up, haven't they? So just throughout the history of all nations, there's been a recognition.
I think you're right.
Of that.
I think you can say breasts if you'd
so
like
if you're
to.
ignoring
I think that's
that,
okay.
If you're ignoring that, you're kind of saying, I don't accept that there's a degree of shame and vulnerability and kind of acceptance about that happened at the fall. So I think there's an awful lot going on in the topic.
Yeah. I wonder if Christians have maybe taken it too far, though. Sometimes. I was just thinking about when I was at university, the Christian Union did the Pure course. Do you remember that? Was that a thing you ever did? But there was, and I don't know if it was the content of the course or it was just the leader of the course, who I think was a man, but was saying that women should never wear a bag that has a strap across here because it will draw men's attention to there, and the boys in the CU were finding it unhelpful. And that I felt like, and I don't think I went back to any more of those sessions after that, because I just felt like that was far too far. I understand there's not on purpose dressing provocatively, but then to not choose a certain style of backpack or bag felt too much. I don't know, Mark, what do you reckon? Do we tend to take this a bit too far sometimes?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're trying to help one another love Christ more. So, we want to be serious about this and think about it. And I think sometimes, those kind of illustrations are just going to work out differently. But I think what often is helpful in these conversations, particularly as I've taught over the years, is that sometimes the opposite sex isn't just aware of what's happening to the other sex, as it were, when they're doing that. So actually, him expressing that is kind of making something in the conscious of the women to think, oh, okay, if I do that, I am. This is what guys are thinking.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're kind of then you're helping people to understand what is going on in this kind of dynamic. Partly because we live in a fallen world, partly because actually everything is sexualized these days. So you're trying to help. Now, does that mean therefore that the women should automatically never do that? It's going to be different, but you're trying to help people just to think about what they're doing, because sometimes the reason I dress in the way I do is I'm just naive. You're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
You're just kind of getting on. But other times, if I'm thinking about loving others, then you're kind of thinking, okay, am I being unhelpful? Am I being, like for a bloke not wearing a top in a certain environment? Is that just unhelpful? That's just not. It's not going to suddenly. It's not because you're Brad Pitt, but it's just causing unhelpful conversations, thoughts, whatever it is. And I think sometimes having those conversations, even if you don't end up saying, you're not trying to say this is the law. Yeah. I think you are trying to help people understand one another's different views, which is why sometimes it's helpful for guys to have teaching on this and women to have teaching on this separately, but to hear how this kind of works out. Because I think lots of the guys don't kind of think it. The guys are kind of all prancing around with their tops off, showing off their muscles, thinking they're the best thing since sliced bread. And they're kind of walking around like young bucks, but they're not having any thought about, oh, hold on a second, how am I actually loving my sister in this? I think it works. Whereas actually when they hear, actually you're being unhelpful, and by the way, why helping them to think about it draws them into more loving others, defeating the pride, the young buck kind of idea. But it comes at both ways. So I think we want to take it seriously because we want to love one another well, and we want to love Jesus.
I think, in answer to your question as well, it's not so much that Christians have overdone it. I think we've overdone particular aspects of it.
Yeah.
But I think if you keep it very broad to do with heart attitudes and motivations, as well as the actual outworking, I think you can talk about it quite a lot. I think if you just say Christian women should be modest, here's a set of rules, everything should be 2 hand breadth below the knees and only 1 hand breadth below the neck or something, that's pretty trivial and is legalistic and not really getting to the heart of it. So I think it's overdone if the rules are overdone, and if there's so much kind of emphasis on, from what I've read, often women police other women, particularly in sort of other church cultures, where there's so much judgment going on of women by women about how they're dressing wrongly and stuff. So I think all that emphasis goes wrong. I think it's more of a personal responsibility rather than we may be able to help other people, but more of a personal responsibility. I mean, I think women in that I've known have appreciated sometimes another woman, and the closer the relationship, the better. Another woman sometimes saying, "I'm not sure whether what you're wearing was all that helpful," because we can see your knickers or whatever it is. It's sometimes helpful to have that said.
I've had that said I've had that said to me before by people, and it is helpful. And I've always thought, and it's never been, I was really hoping to lure some. And it was always, I just did it. Like, I got dressed quite quickly and didn't think about it. So whenever I've always been pleased.
Yeah, and I think that this little Twitter spat I had. What frustrated me was that I totally agree with the principle that it's to do with the heart and motivation, but the person all the people pushing back were all saying, well, it's all men's problem and they should just put a bag over their head if they got a problem with it, as though there were no possible standards at all. And I was trying to say to them, if you have a daughter who's trying to learn lots of things, they learn to read and write and to speak and do maths and everything else. They're also learning loads of social cues, and they're not necessarily, even if they're a believer at age 14, 15, going to know exactly how to dress appropriately. And it's not just you say, you just need to, your heart is right. You're not attempting to allure men. You can wear what you like. You might just say, you can't go out dressed like that because it's making a statement. Even if you're not making a statement, your clothes are making a statement. Yeah. And so I think it is helpful to not have rules, but have principles, I think, and principles to do with what the motivation is, but also what the clothing is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether this has actually become more of a toxic issue in the sense of how you get the response, because the culture we live in now is very much all about the individual, and the individual has the ultimate expression. So I do what I want to do. Therefore, I'm not even thinking about what that has impact on you. So what right have you got to tell me what I should wear or shouldn't wear or how I wear? Yes. And therefore we react against that because we're so individualistic and we're so about the me and the self and I'm in charge that actually therefore and actually we, even within the Christian world, we've imbibed that. So unless the Bible says you can only wear certain clothes, we're going to say, well, actually I've got freedom. I can wear what I like. I do what I like. And then modesty. And then we just hear it as kind of the blokes who are the leaders, downing on women, and that's where that's been overplayed, and probably wrongly by blokes at that point. They wrongly blamed women and not addressed both or the heart issue, but at the same time we're receiving it as I'm an individual. I can wear what I like, do what I like, and express myself how I want to express myself because I have no concern for others. Yeah.
And as well, maybe the narrative sometimes is, and I'm not ashamed of my body as well. So why should I cover up something that I'm not ashamed of? There's loads of stuff like body positivity, and there's loads of good stuff around promoting breastfeeding and allowing women to feel comfortable to do that where they need to. But I even with that, and I'm very cautious in saying this, but even with that, I wonder if there is slightly too much of a flaunt this as much as you can. It's
I wonder whether I wonder whether sometimes that gets picked up as because actually let's try and embarrass the blokes.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but I think there is a mindset. Hey, we're going to push this, and we're not going to worry about what blokes think, even if we're making blokes feel uncomfortable. And actually, we're quite pleased if people are feeling uncomfortable by this. And of course, there's we want to be mature about this, and we want to encourage. But that's where the modesty, isn't it? And there is even the non-believer as well would hold on to some of that.
Yeah. That was a real issue that I encountered when I had my first child. We had a private baby room in the back of the church building, and by the time we had my second child, we were meeting in the school hall, and there wasn't any of that, and that was a real hard thing to navigate. Actually, then what's appropriate in this kind of setting, and maybe that's just ongoing conversations that I'm aware there's a number of young mums within your church now who I guess have had to navigate that themselves. And I wonder if we just need to be a bit more gracious to everyone in this, and perhaps if a man or woman shows up to church or anywhere wearing something that isn't quite right, maybe thinking of their motives, maybe thinking of the best of them, because even recently, I got to church, sat down and realised, actually, I'm not happy with how this is now that I'm here and I've stopped for a second to look at what I'm wearing and how it, and And I think for women in particular, from a young age, right up until old age, women particularly, our bodies change rapidly for all kinds of reasons. We change shape and size a lot throughout our lives, which maybe men don't necessarily. And so our clothes fit differently almost 1 week to the next, it feels, at some points in our lives. And how can we, I guess, navigate the maybe even feelings of guilt or shame that we might feel as Christians who have always been told never let your bra strap show, or never, wear something that's this short or this long or this low, and suddenly you're out somewhere, it's too late to go back and change. How do you navigate that? Do we need to feel guilty? Do we need to put a label on to say this was an accident? Or how do we navigate that?
What about feeling guilty if things were done in good faith, as a genuine mistake? I think to ignore that entirely and say legalism is bad, but sometimes the rules, or not the rules so much, but the kind of ideas that shaped the legalism are not always bad. So I don't have a rule about bra straps in particular, but I have a rule about a principle of what is drawing attention to be honest, the breasts and the genitalia. What is it drawing attention? Are things drawing the eye there? They're probably not helpful. And was that my unintended or intended intention of wearing those clothes? So I think it's sometimes good to reflect on, I wore that, but actually, I had to spend the whole of the service trying to readjust myself because, it was obvious when I bent down or when I uncrossed my legs or whatever that, everything was flying everywhere. Sometimes you just might reflect and say, well, that wasn't a great thing in the moment. I think the rest of the congregation, women and men, have to have a wide variety of charitable, a lot of charity, and think probably it was a genuine mistake. Let's hope, there are people close who could speak into it. Maybe I am this person's close friend and I might just mention it, but it's not going to be the first thing I say to them, as though this has been for the whole of the church service or whatever social occasion I was at. This has been bothering me. I've got to come and tell you, that your thing is wrong. Yeah, but it might be a conversation that comes up a bit later as good advice, like you kind of, have received in the past yourself. I think the shame is just something to reflect on. I think as Christians, we have been liberated from the shame of sin. I don't think that kind of vulnerability shame that's part of the curse has been taken away until the new heavens and new earth. Right? I don't actually know, but I'm not sure about clothes there.
But I think that there is a sense, though, in terms of I think it's more self-conscious than necessarily shame. Yes. I'm just self-conscious. I'm aware. Yeah. Shame is if I'm kind of I've actively sinned and there's a guilt there. The shame isn't there because I haven't actually intentionally sought to go out of my way. I'm just self-conscious, and I'm feeling my self-consciousness, and at that point I've just got to, in one sense, rehearse gospel truth to myself, which is, look, I'm amongst brothers and sisters in Christ. They love me, I love them. I've just got this wrong today. I've worn the wrong thing. I'm aware of it. I'm a little bit self-conscious. And therefore I'm going to have to try and make the best of what I can do, but I'm not going to feel. I think we've got to be careful. I don't think it's shame, because shame implies I've done something intentionally wrong, and I think we've got to be careful. That's not the case. I'm just self-conscious, and all of us are that, aren't we? We've always, blokes, when we're preaching and you've got a light coloured shirt on, it's a hot day, and you suddenly realise you've got sweat patches, hugely down your back and under your armpits. There's a self-consciousness there, But that's not. I'm ashamed. I'm just self-conscious. I'm feeling it, and that's part of just being the natural humanness of life. And that's where being part of a church family means actually in those moments, I'm going to trust that actually my brothers and sisters will just bear with me and love over, and my good friends will mock me for my wrong coloured shirt, and you know what I mean, like, and others will, and
recommend a strong deodorant, perhaps, and
recommend a strong deodorant, and that's how you kind of that's how it works, isn't it? If that was to happen, my boys would just rip me when I got home. But others would just bear with me. I might be self-conscious about it, but it's not shame.
Yeah, that's helpful.
No, and sorry, I probably segued in to shame from the general point. I agree with you on the particular point of on a particular day. I just can't get away from the idea that when Adam and Eve felt the shame of their sin, they covered up. It didn't actually deal with it ultimately because it needed Christ to cover their sin. But it wasn't as though everyone who gets saved suddenly then derobes.
No, I agree.
I no longer feel any shame. I'll take all my clothes off, because living in a fallen world with that, the mixture of the righteous and the unrighteous and our own heart battles as well, there is still a degree of vulnerability and susceptibility towards exploitation and lust, and that covering up is part of that. I mean, obviously covering up is a necessity.
But I think we just probably need a little bit further nuance that, because actually what we're doing in the clothing is the symbolicness of covering the sin. It's not that I'm ashamed of the body in the sense of the size of my body or how my body is, that there's a kind of a shame element to what God has given me, because otherwise we're beginning to say or sound like we're saying there's something wrong with the human body and I should be ashamed of that and clothe myself. I don't think that's what's happened biblically. We're embodied souls. God has given us bodies, and our bodies are there. So therefore we're reflecting that, but we are saying that the shame element that we're talking about in the clothing, I think, is that sense in Genesis 2, isn't it, where basically people are seeing my sin, and the clothing that is then expressed as an act of mercy in Genesis 3 is that sense of a kind of covering of sin and covering of, obviously not fulfilled in Christ, but it's kind of representative of what we need in Jesus. I think more than the sense of my body is so bad that I've got to cover it with clothes and therefore should never let it be seen.
Agreed about it not being so bad. But here's the thing. There was a radio program recently I was listening to on a Sunday morning, and there was a nudist church.
Nudist church?
A nudist church. So they were celebrating communion, singing hymns, having preaching, all totally buck naked, and talking in very biblical language. It wasn't a weird kind of sect. It was, what they were saying was pretty much conventional biblical truth, except for when it got to the part about being nude, which was, I've been covered by the blood of Jesus. I don't need to cover up anymore. I don't need to feel any shame, and so forth. And I did think, why don't I? What is this? Just a cultural thing that I don't agree with this? Like I just wouldn't.
Bring yourself, Graham.
Eh?
Bring yourself.
Yeah, you see,
Can I please just say, please don't?
Is it just a? Yeah, and I was thinking.
Were you asked to preach at that church as director of
Woodnot? Some of my best friends go there, but I'm thinking, why is it both a joke and an awkwardness, and it just something that you would, basically, I don't think will catch on amongst Christians or non-Christians. You're not going to have nude board
Part
meetings.
of me's thinking, but why not? Like, biblically, I don't know if I could necessarily think of anything wrong with it. Maybe.
Because I think it's what you're saying. There is a sense of what it portrays, and I think it is the covering still that is an act of God's mercy. And I think therefore the nakedness is meant for that relationship between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
That is not therefore meant for all else to see. Even in Genesis 1, when you read it, it's between a man and a woman, they felt no shame, that they saw each other in that way.
Yes. Oh, it's so interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the external. I think that's a really important point, that there is no bodily shame between a man and a woman in marriage, and obviously babies in families and so forth. But there is a vulnerability and a possibility to exploit outside of the family, which is, I think, partly why we cover up.
Maybe that's the
as well as climate issues and everything else,
Yeah.
we might cover up to stop getting sunburn or frost.
And interesting, when you even think about actually biblically what happens at the cross, Christ actually clothes us. That's the language that's used, clothes us in his righteousness. So even there we're clothed. So it's an act of his mercy that we are, because of sin, not because our bodies are shameful in and of themselves, but because of the fall and because of what that expresses. Therefore, naked church is just wrong. Biblically,
and would be a massive
socially,
distraction, presumably, in many ways.
If you decide that nakedness is wrong for those reasons, then you can't say wearing a G-string and a top string of some sort. A bikini made of string is okay for men and women. You got to kind of decide. Okay, pardon?
The mankini.
A mankini.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think there are some kind of absolutes, but I'm not sure whether I don't know about absolutes. There is some spectrum upon which you think I've gone too far. Like, let's assume we can't be all naked. Probably then it's not useful if every man and woman did sit in a bikini, mankini, whatever, in the whole congregation. You'd also think that was weird, unless you're all on the beach or something. You would just think it was weird and a distraction, partly sexually, but partly just ridiculously.
Yeah,
I think.
Bit cold.
Well, but I mean, interesting. We're not wanting to sound flippant.
Yes.
Jesus didn't walk around naked, and he was the perfect man.
Absolutely, yeah.
So was that just a social thing, but if he was trying to make a point, you're clean, you're perfect, therefore don't wear clothes anymore. Surely he would have done that. But there was a sense of, even in taking our shame, he was actually stripped naked on the cross.
Yeah.
In order to highlight the shame that we feel because of sin. So there is something tangible between my sinfulness still, even as one who is covered in Christ's righteousness, and nakedness in that sense, which is removed in a kind of in the right context, but in the wider context, it's still there.
And Jesus did teach on that. I'm thinking of when he washed the disciples' feet, and then Peter saying, "Oh, wash all of me," and Jesus says, "No, you're clean. You are clean. You only need to wash your feet." So actually, that if he was going to do that, he could have said, "Oh, you're clean. You don't need to wear clothes," but he didn't.
Yeah,
he did wash his feet. Oh, yeah. So as we finish off, how's a good way to teach our children about this? I've had, even just the last week or so, I've had quite a few conversations with my kids about this. They've just had swimming lessons, and actually my daughter's 7, and I did have to kind of say to her, like, because she won't listen to this, so it's all right. Maybe when she's older she'll be embarrassed, but she just wants to strip everything off, get changed like this in front of everyone. And actually I'm saying to her now, actually you do need to kind of cover up a bit now, like, and it's not there's anything to be ashamed of, and she's obviously not trying to lure anybody or this, but how do we? And my son has watched the roofers next door, and on the sunny day they all took their tops off, the men, and my son, he's 5, and he's, "Oh, can I go out?" We were going to the shop. "Oh, can I go out without my top on because it's hot?" And I was sort of saying, "Well, no." How do we have those conversations to not to make them ashamed of their bodies, but just to kind of give them this, just have this conversation with them?
I think it depends on their age, doesn't it? I think and their ability with lots of things with our children. We tell them they just got to do it, and we don't always explain.
Sure.
Or we explain in an age appropriate way. So you might not want to load up your children at their age with every reason why this might not be right. A bit like the discussion we've just had. In some cases, you might just say, "No, you just need to wear a shirt because that's what children do your age," or you just need to be careful getting changed because it's just not nice. And you may not explain the reasons necessarily, but you will as they grow. It's
even the Bible talks about private parts of modesty, doesn't it? 1 Corinthians 13, 12. Sorry. So you even got I think there is a lesson, isn't it? Where there's parts of our bodies that are private, and therefore we should keep them private. And we're teaching our children that from a young age. They don't need to know the reasons for all of that at that point. But even that is helping them to understand and navigate. And I think even actually just consciously what we allow our children, even from a very young age, sends messages.
I think that there's the whole sexualization at young and young ages. So although our culture would be thankfully still against paedophilia, there's this weird contradiction that there's quite sexualized young children's clothing.
Yeah.
And I think without necessarily giving the whole sort of explanation of why that's not good, just not encouraging that and just saying it's not appropriate. You're not a woman yet. You're age 7, stop wearing a bra kind of thing is reasonable, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if that answers the how, Katie.
No, I think it does. I think I said something like, "Oh, it's not polite, and people don't want to see your bottom." Frankly,
that sounds very appropriate.
Fine
Thing to say.
Good. Tick the box. Lovely. I think that's probably us for today. Have either of you got anything else you want to add? Or caveat or...
No, I think just coming back to it, it's a heart thing and it's a love thing. We're thinking about our own motivations and we are thinking about other people. We don't want to encourage people to lust, even though it's their problem. We don't want to encourage people to envy our jewelry, even though it's their problem in a sense. And so there's a lot about love. Why are you smiling, Mark, about that?
No, it's all fine.
Are you envying my jewelry?
Indeed.
All right. We'll see you next time. We will be talking about one of the characteristics of God, because next one will be the last one of the month. And it'll be Graham's last one for a little while. He's having a break. You can tell us about that next week. And do follow us on Twitter. We are on Twitter. We do send the occasional tweet. And if there's more of you, there'll be less occasional. It's at ordinarycchh. Do come and say hello to us there. And we will see you next time.